The hospital corridors buzzed with urgency. Nurses hurried past with clipboards, doctors whispered in tense voices, and the faint beeping of machines echoed against the sterile white walls. It was late evening, the city outside drowned in the orange glow of streetlights, but inside the hospital, the night was only beginning. At the end of the corridor, a private ward stood guarded. Behind the door lay Richard Holloway, a billionaire real estate mogul who was known for his sharp business acumen, iron will, and unmatched wealth. To the world, he was a symbol of power and success. But tonight, he was just a fragile man lying unconscious, hooked to machines, fighting for his life. The doctors said he had suffered a massive heart attack. It had been sudden, brutal, and unexpected. For years, Richard had lived like he was invincible, running corporations, crushing competitors, living in luxury, but now, his heart had betrayed him. Inside the ward, his son David Holloway sat slouched on a leather chair, his face pale and eyes red from crying. At only 23, David had already been groomed to take over his father's empire, but at this moment, none of that mattered. All he wanted was for his father to open his eyes again. Suddenly, the silence of the hospital was shattered. The main doors burst open, and a figure stumbled inside. It was a woman, her clothes worn and faded, her shoes cracked with age, her hair tied hastily into a bun. Her eyes burned with desperation. She moved quickly, almost frantically, clutching a small cloth bundle in her hands. The security guard leapt forward, blocking her path. "Ma'am, you can't just run in here," he barked. "I need to see him," she cried, her voice trembling yet filled with unshakable determination. "Please, let me through. I have to see Richard Holloway." The guard frowned. "Do you even know who you're talking about? That's a private ward. Only family is allowed." "I don't care," she snapped, her voice cracking with raw emotion. "I have to see him before it's too late." The commotion caught the attention of David, who stepped out of his father's ward. His sharp blue eyes studied the woman. She was clearly poor, perhaps a maid or a worker, but there was something about her, something in the way she trembled yet refused to back down, that made him pause. "Who are you?" David demanded. The woman's lips quivered as she clutched the cloth bundle tighter. "My name is Elena. Please, I know I don't belong here, but I need to see your father." Just once. David raised an eyebrow, confusion etched across his face. His father was one of the most powerful men in the city. He had business partners, politicians, celebrities, but who was this maid, barging into a hospital demanding to see him? "You can't just walk in and demand to see him," David said coldly. "If you're looking for charity, this is not the time." Her face flushed with a mix of anger and pain. "Charity," she whispered, almost offended. "No, this isn't about money. This is about something much bigger." Before David could respond, a nurse rushed over. "Sir, please, we can't have disturbances here. Should I call security to escort her out?" Elena's eyes widened in panic. She dropped to her knees right there in the hallway. "Please, I'm begging you, don't throw me out. If I don't see him now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. He needs to hear the truth before it's too late." David hesitated. The desperation in her eyes was undeniable. He had seen people beg for favors from his father before, but this was different. This wasn't greed, this was pain. "What truth?" he asked, his voice softening just slightly. Elena looked at him, her lips trembling as if speaking the words would shatter her. She clutched the cloth bundle tighter. And for a brief moment, her eyes darted toward the door where Richard lay unconscious. "The truth about who I am," she whispered. The air in the corridor grew heavy. David felt a strange chill run down his spine. Before he could press further, Richard's monitors inside the ward beeped violently, and doctors rushed in shouting orders. David's attention snapped back to his father, his heart lurching in terror. In the chaos, no one noticed Elena slip past the guards. With trembling hands and tears streaking her cheeks, she pushed open the ward door and stepped inside. There he was, the man she had thought she'd never face again. Pale, frail, and vulnerable, Richard Holloway lay fighting for breath. Elena's knees buckled. Memories she had buried for decades came crashing back like a tidal wave. She clutched the bundle to her chest, took a shaky step forward, and whispered through her tears. "Richard, it's me." Elena's voice quivered as she spoke his name, but Richard did not respond. His eyes remained closed, his chest rising and falling only with the help of machines. Yet something in her heart told her he could hear her, that deep inside the fog of pain, he was listening. She stepped closer, brushing past the doctors who barely noticed her in the chaos. One nurse tried to stop her, but Alina's trembling hand shot up. Just 1 minute, she pleaded, her voice breaking. Please, just 1 minute. The nurse hesitated. Something in Alina's eyes, an ache that looked older than time, made her step aside. Elena moved to the bedside, her knees shaking beneath her. She laid the cloth bundle on the small table beside Richard. Slowly, carefully, she unfolded it, revealing a small wooden box, worn by age but polished with care. She opened it, and inside lay a faded photograph, two young faces, full of hope and love. Her fingers grazed the photo. Tears blurred her vision as she looked at the man in the picture. It was Richard, decades younger, smiling in a way she hadn't seen in years. And beside him stood a girl, herself, not more than 20, her eyes shining with dreams. Alina's lips trembled as she whispered, "Do you remember, Richard? Do you remember the promises you made to me?" David stormed into the room at that moment, his face twisted with anger. "What the hell are you doing here? Get away from my father." But when he saw the photograph in her hands, his steps faltered. His eyes darted between the faded image and the trembling woman. That's you," he whispered, pointing at the young woman in the picture. Elena nodded, tears spilling freely. "Yes, that was me. A lifetime ago." David's chest tightened. "What is this supposed to mean?" Elena swallowed hard. She turned to Richard, her voice rising with emotion. "You left me, Richard. You left me with nothing but memories and a broken heart. Do you know what it was like, raising a child alone, with no money, no support, while you built your empire?" The words struck David like thunder. His eyes widened. "A child?" Alina's hands shook as she clutched the photograph to her chest. "Yes, our child." The room fell silent. The only sounds were the steady beeps of the monitors and the shallow breaths of the man lying unconscious between them. David staggered back, his world spinning. He shook his head in disbelief. No, that can't be true. My father. He would have told me." Elena looked at him with a sorrow so deep it made his heart ache. "Your father buried the truth. He chose wealth over love. Ambition over family. And I was left to pick up the pieces." David's throat tightened. He had grown up in a mansion, never wanting for anything. To hear that his father had abandoned another family, another child, was like a knife to his chest. Where is this child now?" he asked, his voice shaking. Alina's gaze dropped to the floor. Her tears fell silently as she whispered, "Gone." The word hung in the air like a ghost. David's heart pounded. "What do you mean, gone?" Alina's hands trembled as she reached for the wooden box again. This time, she pulled out a tiny pair of baby shoes, carefully wrapped in cloth. They were worn and faded, but kept with such love that it broke David's heart to look at them. "My daughter," Elena choked out, her voice breaking. "Our daughter, she didn't survive. I was too poor, too helpless. I begged for help, but no one listened. If Richard had been there, if he hadn't turned his back on me, she might have lived." Her sobs filled the room, raw and agonizing. David felt like the ground beneath him was crumbling. His father, the man he idolized, the man everyone admired, had a past darker than he could have imagined. He looked at his father lying on the bed, pale and weak, and for the first time, David wasn't sure if he wanted him to wake up. Elena turned back to Richard, her voice trembling but strong. "You don't get to leave this world without knowing what you've done. You don't get to die a hero in everyone's eyes while I've lived in the shadows of your betrayal." At that very moment, Richard stirred. His eyelids fluttered, his lips parting as a faint groan escaped him. The doctors rushed to his side, checking his vitals, adjusting machines, but Alina's presence seemed to pierce through the fog. Richard's eyes opened slowly, weak and glassy. He turned his head ever so slightly, and when his gaze fell on Elena, his breath hitched. "Elena." His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried decades of recognition, guilt, and sorrow. Elena's tears flowed harder. "Yes, Richard, it's me. The woman you left behind." David stood frozen, his heart pounding in his ears, as the truth finally collided with his father's past. Richard's lips trembled. His hand, frail and shaky, reached out toward Elena. I never stopped loving you," he rasped. Elena flinched as though struck, torn between fury and the ghost of a love that still lingered deep inside her heart. And in that moment, David realized this night would change everything he thought he knew about his family, his father, and himself. The room felt heavier than the night itself. David stood frozen at the foot of the bed, his chest heaving with disbelief, while Elena trembled beside the man she had once loved. The beeping machines marked each fragile second, each reminder that time was slipping away. Richard's lips quivered, his breath shallow but desperate. He tried to speak again, his voice broken by weakness. Elena, I was young, foolish, so blinded by ambition. I thought money was everything. I thought love would only hold me back. His words cut through the air like shards of glass. Elena bit her lip, fighting back tears. And so you abandoned us. You left me to raise a baby alone, while you built skyscrapers and dined with kings. Richard's eyes filled with tears, real tears, not the kind his ruthless business dealings had ever allowed him to show. I thought I'd make it right someday. I thought, once I had power, once I had the world in my hands, I'd come back for you. But by the time I looked back, the years were gone. His frail body shook with regret, each word taking its toll. Elena's chest tightened. Do you know what those years cost me, Richard? Do you know what it's like to bury your own child while the man who could have saved her chose his empire instead? David closed his eyes. He couldn't bear the sight of Elena's pain or the sound of her sobs. He had admired his father all his life, but now he saw the cracks in the foundation of the man he idolized. Richard reached weakly toward Elena, his hand trembling. I deserve your hatred, but before I leave this world, I need you to know, I never stopped loving you. Not for one day. Elena's heart wavered. For decades she had replayed this moment in her mind, what she would say if she ever stood before him again. She thought she'd spit on him, curse him, turn her back as he once did to her. But seeing him now, frail, vulnerable, clinging to life, the anger tangled with grief. David finally found his voice, his tone sharp and trembling. How could you do this, Father? How could you hide something like this? A child, my sister, dead because of your choices. Richard turned his head slowly toward his son, his eyes glassy with tears. I failed her. I failed you. I thought I was protecting you from shame, from the mistakes of my past. But in doing so, I created something far worse. David's chest ached as he struggled to process it all. He wanted to scream, to storm out, to never look at his father again. Yet another part of him, a part that still remembered the man who had held his hand as a boy, kept him rooted to the spot. Elena, her face streaked with tears, placed the tiny baby shoes on Richard's chest. This is what you left behind. Not towers of glass and steel. Not fortunes or fame. This. Her voice cracked. The proof of the life we lost. Richard clutched the shoes weakly, his body trembling with sobs. For the first time in decades, the great Richard Halloway was stripped of all pride, all wealth, all power. He was just a man crushed under the weight of his own sins. The doctors hovered nervously, monitoring his fragile state, but none dared interrupt the storm of emotion unfolding. Richard's breathing grew shallower. He squeezed David's hand with surprising strength. Don't repeat my mistakes, son. Money, power, it means nothing if you abandon love. Promise me you'll live differently. Promise me you won't let ambition blind you. Tears streamed down David's cheeks. He had never seen his father like this, never heard such vulnerability in his voice. He nodded shakily. I promise. Richard's gaze shifted back to Elena. I can't undo the past. But if forgiveness is in your heart, even just a fraction, let me go knowing you don't hate me completely. Elena's throat tightened. The years of suffering, the nights of hunger, the empty crib, all of it surged through her. But as she looked into his dying eyes, she saw not the ruthless mogul the world knew, but the young man she had once loved, broken by his own choices. Her hand shook as she brushed his forehead gently. I can't forget, Richard. But I forgive you. For her sake. For the child we lost. Richard's lips trembled into the faintest of smiles. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Thank you. The machines beeped faster, then slower, then steadied into a haunting rhythm. The doctors moved in, but Richard's hand slipped from Elena's and David's grasp, falling limp against the sheets. The monitors screamed their flat, final note. The great Richard Halloway was gone. Elena collapsed into tears, clutching the baby shoes to her chest. David stood frozen, his world shattering, yet somewhere deep inside, a strange clarity formed. His father had been deeply flawed, but his final lesson was clear: love was worth more than all the wealth in the world. As the night stretched on, David placed a hand on Elena's shoulder. You're not alone anymore, he whispered. Whatever pain my father left you with, I'll help carry it now. Elena looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. For the first time in years, a flicker of hope stirred in her chest. And though Richard Halloway was gone, The truth he had tried to bury had finally been set free, leaving behind not just pain, but the possibility of healing.